Hi everyone, my name's Stephanie Hopper. I'm one of the co-directors of the talent practice at Capfinity, and my co-host and co-director Celine will introduce herself shortly. Just a few words about Capfinity. We are a global business based in Birmingham, London, Dublin, various US locations, and of course Sydney, Australia. And we've been helping organisations to find candidates, develop employees and transform their business around our USP of strengths-based assessment and development for over 16 years now. Celine and I both work on Altitude, which is our leadership proposition and part of the talent practice. It's a market-leading method of assessing and developing your leaders through a strengths lens. Celine.
Thank you. Hi, Steph. Hi, everybody. Delighted to be back for what is our 11th episode. So Celine Floyd, co-director of the talent practice with specialism area in leadership assessment. So helping organisations to assess their leaders globally across sectors. And we have a really exciting episode today because we are focusing on female leadership in the finance sector. And we are delighted to be joined by two really fantastic and very impressive guests, Helen and Amy, who have lived and breathed being female leaders in the finance sector for a number of years. So we're waiting with bated breath to hear what that's been like and your thoughts on that. So thank you so much for joining us both. Perhaps we could start with just introducing yourselves to the audience, who you are and why you're passionate about leadership and this topic. I will come to Amy first. Hi, Amy. Welcome.
Hi, Celine. Hi, Steph. Hi, Helen. Thank you for inviting me today. Glad to be here. I'm Amy Halford. I'm the head of European Client Services at Capital Group, which is a global investment management company. I joined the finance industry in 2005, so 16 years ago, when things were very different for women. I was told that there could be barriers for me joining the finance industry because I'm a woman. Also, I didn't know anyone in the industry. Nepotism was rife back then. And also, I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge University. So I didn't let this stop me. And I've worked at Rathbones, UBS, and Seven Investment Management in various client-facing roles across sales and service. And then I took a leadership position at BlackRock for 6 years, which is where Helen is now, and before joining Capital Group 18 months ago. So I'm passionate about the subject of leadership as I've worked my way up continually, pushing myself out of my comfort zone and often having to push through barriers that were in front of me because of my gender, and also having a lack of female role models. So I really want to be an advocate for change and help pave the way for other women and men, I should say, and help really build and nurture leadership for the future.
Amazing. Thank you, Amy. Welcome. Delighted to have you. And Helen, hi.
Hi, Celine. Hi, Steph. And great to see Amy. As you mentioned, we both worked together at BlackRock for a number of years. But I'm Helen Jewell. I'm the Global Director of Research for Fundamental Equities at BlackRock, which is also an international asset management organisation. And I've been working in the financial industry for over 20 years now, originally as an investment banker. I was at Barclays and Deutsche Bank, and actually I went via a training route then into equity research at Goldman Sachs, and then 6 years ago moved to work at BlackRock. And I'm also very passionate about female leadership. I feel very lucky that in my career, I've actually had a number of female leaders as mentors, and I've learned so much from them, both just watching and observing how they work, but also actually in the time that they've taken to just help teach me about how to develop my leadership skills. And I know it's a really kind of cheesy thing to say, but paying it forward is something I feel very passionate about. And that's why on this beautifully sunny day, I'm really excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you. And I guess when I was reflecting on today's episode, I was thinking about an experience we had at Capfinity for many years. We were running a female leaders program within a global FTSE 100 organization we ran it for about 7 or 8 years. And we probably took about 700 women through the program. And it was one of my favorite pieces of work when I kind of look back on the past. But in the first week, we used to talk to these women about, like we used to sort of try and lay out the current state of play for women around the globe. You know, who was holding the most power around the world, where, you know, how many countries were run by women. And to be honest, I used to feel quite depressed because year on year, just didn't really change that much. And I used to think, surely this year we've got a better story. But no. And so something that stayed with me since then is I often notice in the news, like, female firsts. So, you know, I kind of celebrate them, but then I also feel this slight depression inside that they still make the news and that they still are things to talk about. You know, the first female vice president is only this year in the US, or Janet Yellen running the US Treasury, like the first female to run it since it was founded in the 18th century. It just seems incredible when you think the suffragettes were kind of on their mission over 100 years ago. And recently I read a really inspiring blog about, it was written by a female co-founder of a new startup tech firm. And she had set out to achieve 50% of her funding to come from female investors. And she knew that would take her a lot longer to fundraise and get the project off the ground. But she was successful and she's very proud about it. So I just wonder, as a first question, are there ways in which we need to be more intentional in our actions to kind of work to a place where we've got more parity for men and women in the world of finance? Let me start with Helen. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. We definitely do need to be more intentional, and I share your frustration sometimes, Steph. I look back and I think, oh goodness, you know, first female vice president, and they still haven't had a female president over in the US. But I think we have to really focus on the progress that has been made if we don't get ourselves too despondent. And the way the progress is being made is by those kind of intentions, people intentionally knowing it will take longer. And that's a 50% benchmark. I mean, that again, if you really stop to think about it, it can be quite depressing. This wasn't 100% funding, it was 50%, and yet it took longer. But we need to be intentional. And it's through those intentions you do see that change over time. Something I've experienced over my career is very much a greater intention in terms of recruiting more women into the organizations that I've worked out, whether it's BlackRock, whether it's Goldman Sachs before that, whether it was Deutsche before, really trying hard to kind of appeal to women as an industry to work in, working hard to attract more women and bring more women into the organization. And it does take longer. It takes time. You've got to do all the interviewing, make sure you're kind of seeking out all of the right people. But that does take time. And I think we just have to be patient and allow us to get there. I think I've disappeared somehow, but I can still see myself speaking. So I'll try and get myself back.
We can still hear you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Helen. And Amy, same question to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with Helen. We absolutely need to be more deliberate and intentional, and that's how we're going to really push this forward. I share your sentiment, Steph, that it feels like we're not moving quick enough. And to do that, we do need to have targets. One thing we're doing at Capital Group is setting ourselves targets about how many women we want to hire, how many women we want in senior leadership positions, and how many women we want to promote. I'm actually really proud to say we've actually got over 50% women at the company, but we still haven't got enough people in those leadership positions. And that is what we really need to target. We need to create opportunities. I mean, you mentioned about leadership programs. These are great. They're essential for us to try and push women into these leadership roles. Mentoring programs, coaching programs. These are all ways for us to be deliberate and intentional. And we've really got to make that policy from the top down and make sure that men as well as women are encouraging, women to take leadership positions.
I know I found myself almost like questioning my own biases actually in the decision making that I might want to make, because I think we can be as guilty as our male colleagues of sometimes looking for the wrong role models as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, Helen mentioned earlier about being lucky to have female role models. This isn't to say we can't have male role models as well. And, you know, you've got initiatives like He for She in recent years. And what's great is to see so many more males being allies for women. And I'll actually speak for Helen, but I know at BlackRock there's an award for men that support women in their careers, which I thought was brilliant and something I'd love to see other companies as well.
Amazing.
It's important, isn't it, to look at it in the round, because we know there are men out there who are as passionate or more passionate about this subject than some women. So it's really dangerous to take an overly kind of broad brush approach. Amy, has there been any other kind of particular experience in your career that you feel has kind of helped you or been instrumental in continuing your self-belief and your confidence and your capability to achieve what you've achieved? Anything else that you think has been pivotal to that?
Yeah, I think it's been a combination of taking the barriers and using them to spur me on. So like I said, in the earlier part of my career, not having that female leadership role models, which I'm glad to say has changed in the latter half of my career. And I really think I could split my career in two in terms of how I was treated as a woman in the first half and how I'm treated now. So I think there's those sort of experiences, the negative ones that have really spurred me on. And I thought, I'm going to do this anyway. And then I think there's the really positive things that have happened to me, which have been people believing in me, men and women, who have taken a chance on me, given me opportunities, given me promotions, given me leadership positions, and not seen me being a woman as a negative. In fact, they've seen it as a positive diversifier and really celebrated it. So I feel like my gender is very much celebrated now. It certainly wasn't in the first few years of my career.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Like, as you say, if you described it as first half of your career and then the second half, and I'm just thinking ahead to the future, and I guess what the next kind of section of your career would like, or what the nirvana could look like for females coming through. Steph, I wonder, I know we're completely deviating off script here, but I wonder if it might be a nice occasion to talk about what you were going to mention at the end around what your daughter's been doing, because I think Amy would love to hear that, and I just think it might bring a forward focus to the conversation. Steph's daughter's been involved in this fantastic work, which is really about the next generation, isn't it, of women coming through. Go on, Steph.
Someone that I know through freelance work founded an organisation called the Festival of the Girl a few years ago, and they had their inaugural Festival of the Girl 2 years ago. And I think they had about 150 girls attend it between the ages of 8 and 12. And it was like an in-person event in central London. Of course, last year it went to be virtual, and they had video recordings for the girls on all sorts of topics and all sorts of subjects and inspiring speakers and so on. And they had over 2,000 girls access those resources in 8 different countries. So this year's one is happening in a couple of weeks' time, and actually Capfinity is sponsoring it this year, which we're really thrilled to do. And we'll be doing a little video on strengths for these girls, because they say that girls from the age of 7 start to lose confidence and start to believe they're not as good as boys. And so, you know, what can we do to help, you know, raise them in a less gender stereotyped way more than anything, is kind of at the heart of it.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I think anything to help with the confidence gap. And I think we have seen a shift, certainly in recent years, where females have grown in confidence in their ability to do it. But imposter syndrome is something we talk about all the time. It's very real. It's still there. And I think if we can catch girls at an early age to start building that confidence, that sounds amazing.
Wonderful. Okay. So the other, I guess, piece that I was looking at in research for this session, and Helen seems to have been sucked into a tech black hole, bless her. So hopefully she'll re-emerge soon. But the other, I guess, with fascination, I've been looking at how the pandemic has evolved, and obviously it's been a an issue that we've been tackling on a global level, and there's lots of research and indeed just anecdotally that shows that those countries with a female leader have fared better in the pandemic. And so of course it starts us thinking around, well why is that? So really interested, Amy, in your view of what traits female leaders may have specifically that help them in times of crisis. I don't know if you've seen that, or what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely. No, definitely. And I feel like I always need to caveat everything I say when talking about female leadership with, this is very, generalising, and that's not to say that men don't have these traits. But we've definitely seen clear commonality in senior women during the pandemic. My observation is that female leaders' responses felt very personal rather than political. I think there is a widely held belief that women excel in a crisis. And as you say, it has been fascinating to watch it play out, and particularly the immediate reaction of women in the first wave of the crisis. I think a couple of qualities that I'd call out from those early days were the kind of decisive action that some of the females took and how truthful they were. If we look at someone like Angela Merkel, she was very quick to tell her country, this is serious, we need to take it seriously. They were quick to start testing. They were quick to go into lockdown. They sort of skipped that phase of denial and anger that we saw elsewhere, maybe with some of the male leaders around the world. And it didn't feel like they had another agenda. They were just trying to sort out the crisis. And I think there were gender differences with the propensity to lock down early. There's often talk about women being more risk averse, even at leadership levels. But actually, it felt like a big risk to go into lockdown, not on people's lives, that was, saving lives, but it was a risk to the economies. But they were quick and decisive. And I thought that, and you could look at Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand as well, very quick to lock down, crystal clear on what they were doing, which kind of leads into communication as well. I think the communication was very clear. One other story, and then we can go to Helen, but the Norwegian Prime Minister, Erna Solberg, she actually had a TV conference for children, so no adults allowed, and it was a dedicated press conference for them, and she got them to ask questions, and she said it's okay to feel scared, which just showed that she was thinking about everyone in her country, not just the voters. And I wonder if we would have seen a male behave like that and communicate to people of all levels like that.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that she had done that. That's fascinating. Okay, Helen seems to be with us, but frozen in time. Okay. Well, if Helen starts to...
I can continue, Celine. That's fine. I think another quality that I would throw in is, as I said, this empathy and focus on human, the human aspect. I think compared to some of the chaps around the world who were, it was scary, wasn't it? There was a lot of authoritarianism, not believing there was a pandemic. We saw Bolsonaro talking about the pandemic as being a little bit of flu or a bit of cold. We saw Boris shaking hands of COVID patients really early on. And these just weren't qualities we saw from the women. There was just huge levels of empathy. They seemed to stay calm under pressure and allowed them to just get straight to the matter at hand and focus on that human aspect of the pandemic, because they were concerned about the well-being of people and not maybe their political agenda.
I think something I'm taking from what you're saying, Amy, is just the way there was a far more authentic response from a lot of the female leaders in the pandemic. And as you said, they were more willing to just be a lot more open and tell the truth and say when they didn't have the answers as well, which I think just builds a different level of trust, really, between us and them.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's making me reflect on is we know from the research that there tends to be higher levels of kind of emotional intelligence and kind of empathy with female leaders. And when you were speaking, Amy, it was that we were kind of ticking off, wasn't it? It was that empathic connection with the people. And I think what's really startling is sometimes in business or the corporate world, historically, that's been seen as a soft or a fluffy kind of thing to have, and it gets in the way of commercials or getting things done. But I mean, there's no greater test than a global pandemic where everything that we know about our lives was in jeopardy, to prove that actually going forward with that empathic and emotionally intelligent style is what does pay off. So I think the thing for me is we need to take this forward, don't we? We need to take learnings from this. And I think I referenced this in an episode a few months ago, where one of our clients, a global insurance company, they are actually reviewing their leadership framework at the moment, which has been in place for a number of years, but through specifically the eyes of the pandemic. And what the HRD then wants to do is to make sure that they don't lose any of the great leadership styles that have come to the fore from the pandemic. So they're actually going to grab hold of them, put them to paper and take them forward. And I hope we can do that on a kind of global level in terms of this, the performance that we've seen from these female leaders globally.
And celebrate it. You're absolutely right. I think that you talk about emotional intelligence. I think women were often referred to as emotional before, emotional leaders, or too emotional to lead. And actually, I think that's been mistaken for emotional intelligence. And I think we need to celebrate that there are differences between men and women, and both need to be celebrated. And that is what we need now. We talk a lot more about diversity, and diversity at the leadership level is critical. We see that more women are joining boards. We see more women CEOs now. It's not enough. We see more women heads of state, prime ministers, leading countries. Again, it's not enough. We need to see that more, and we need people to really value what women bring to the table, which I think we're seeing more now. But there's still a way to go.
And
Actually,
go on,
Steph. No, go on.
No, I was just going to say, because I was thinking about the beginning of my career, Amy, and I worked in financial markets, and I spent a lot of time trooping in and out of trading rooms that, were very much one gender. I was working for a supplier organisation, and certainly in that supplier organisation, I felt this as well, that the boys' club was very evident, within the world of banking and finance and so on. And actually, some recent research shows that is still there, and that male employees assigned male managers are promoted faster than those who had female managers, whereas female employees had the same sort of career results, regardless of whether their manager was a man or a woman. So I'm just wondering, though, whether you feel what's happened over the last couple of years could have helped a bit with that, because this more hybrid approach to work, that's surely going to have an impact on the boys' club. Or do you think not really? They're all just going to be back there doing what they were doing before.
Yeah, and I think to kind of caveat the question, I saw much more of a boys' club in my earlier career. I mean, in my first ever interview in the city, I was asked, can you handle banter? We don't hire girls in this team. So it's incredible to believe that's where we've come from to now at Capital Group. I don't feel that there is a boys' club. However, it does exist in the industry. There's no denying that. So I think the short answer is yes. I think that the way we are shifting to a more hybrid approach is going to have an impact. So much business was done over lunch and in the pub and on the golf course. And I think people are going to be spending more time at home. And we're all going to need to find ways to be more visible and build those relationships remotely. I guess one risk we have is that women take more advantage of working in that hybrid way, because they take on more of the childcare responsibilities, for example. However, I have seen personally a real big shift actually in men getting more involved, particularly over the pandemic. And I think a lot of that has been out of necessity. but a lot of the guys that I speak to have loved having that family time. And so I think that this new hybrid working, it's an equal opportunity for everyone to work from home. It should give equal flexibility. And I'd like to think it will balance things out a lot. And I think as well, rather than thinking about sort of deconstructing the boys' club, I think what we need to really focus on is building that diversity at those upper levels, and the boys' club will dissipate over time because there are more women, and also the boys' club's not very inclusive of introverts either. So let's have diversity in all aspects, whether it's introverts, extroverts, race, gender, sexuality. I think that the boys' club will hopefully become a thing of the past.
I love the fact that Helen's not with us in the room, but she's on chat and she's agreeing with everything you're saying, Amy. She's narrating on chat.
Nodding.
She is very virtually nodding. She's just written in capital letters "spot on," so you can't get more of an accolade than that. Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love what you said, Amy, about there's no point trying to deconstruct the boys' club. You know, let's look at what we can do and how can we change the power bases so that actually the boys' club loses its power base over a period of time. Yeah, I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? What you were asked in your first interview. I mean, you are good at, you can handle banter, so yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Say no more. Well, I think in summary, what I've heard today is that we're believers that those deliberate kind of intentional actions are needed, whether there's some form of target or a decision that we make, but that those deliberate actions are what are going to help us find, lead to the change that we're looking for. There was something around building confidence early, because imposter syndrome seems to be something that comes up a lot. I hear it a lot from male leaders as well, though, which is really interesting. Yeah. So there's something there, isn't there? But building confidence early. And then the fact that we witnessed a lot of really decisive action, which, Amy, you called out on from female leaders at the beginning of the pandemic, but also a lot of truth and honesty, which really helped people kind of get behind what they were doing. And then finally, just, is really our focus needs to move away from deconstructing the boys' club and just thinking about other things we can do that will really dissipate it over time. So I'd just love to come to each of you for a final thought. Helen, feel free to put yours in chat. If it's there in a couple of minutes, I'll be able to read it out for you. But Amy, what's your final thought on this topic?
Absolutely. Well, thank you both so much for inviting me today. And, I've really enjoyed digging into this topic, and I could talk all day on female leadership. But I think I would end on, there's no denying that women diversity and value at the leadership level. And I really think that all leaders, female and male, should take responsibility for continuing to attract and encourage and develop female talent. To ensure we have that diversity at senior levels, but also making sure that we've got parity and equity once they get there as well. We want to make it an inclusive environment once they get there. So I think things have improved for women. I think we've got a long way to go. I'd like to see the change happen much quicker, but we all need to take accountability. So I would say I feel very positive about the future for women in finance, but we all need to play our part in pushing it forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. And Celine, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's been a really wonderful discussion. It's been really kind of humbling to hear about, Amy, your experience and your kind of career so far, and great to hear how things have progressed from those early years where you had your first interviews and some of the horrendous things that were said in those. So we've clearly come on. And I think Helen mentioned it at the beginning about us needing to remain positive, and so I do remain positive for the future, because I think we've made real momentum over the last few years, and we have to believe that at the point that our daughters will be coming through into the workplace, that things would have changed again. So and great to see us celebrating the female leadership through the pandemic. I think that's been really powerful and really fascinating to watch.
Thank you, Celine. And Helen's final closing comments. We're going to get her back, aren't we, Celine?
We
On
are,
another episode. She owes us one now. No, but she said that she would finish by saying, we're making progress and let's keep working together to achieve this by learning from those around us. And she says, yes, she does owe us one. So there we go. We'll have her back on another episode. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. We're actually going to be on a Thursday at slightly different time. As a just, switching it up, looking at leadership legacy with Priyanka and Mary Gregory. And just a final mention that we're sponsoring Festival of the Girls. So if you've got any girls who are aged 7 to 11 years old, you can sign them up for it. If you Google it, it's free of charge. It's a non-for-profit initiative, really aiming to inspire and engage girls and support adults to raise girls in a less stereotyped way. It's on Sunday, the 10th of October. If you get them signed up before the end of September and you're in the UK, they will send them a booklet, which is like an accompaniment to the day. So it's virtual again this year. I think next year it will be in person. Anyway, as for us, thank you very much for watching and listening. Amy, thank you for your time. Helen, thank you for your time. And I'm so sorry that it didn't work out. And we will see you in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks, Steph. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.